Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Cadet 3rd Class Samuel Donnellan. Welcome to the 28th Annual National Character and Leadership Symposium. It is my privilege to welcome you and our guest speaker, Ms. Stacy Allison. Ms. Allison is best known as the first American woman to summit Mount Everest. She serves on the Board of Trustees of National University and is the chairperson for the American Lung Association's fundraiser, Climb for Clean Air. Remarkably, she is also a successful author and a committed mother of two. After being stopped by a storm on her first attempt to summit Mount Everest, Ms. Allison returned, and on September 29, 1988, became the first American woman to reach the peak of the world's highest mountain. In the spirit of giving back to her community, Stacy chairs the American Lung Association of Pacific Mountain Region's fundraiser, Climb for Clean Air. She has worked on women's build projects for Habitat for Humanity and also volunteers for Medical Teams International. Stacy's first book, Beyond the Limits, A Woman's Triumph on Everest, is a suspenseful, triumphant adventure story. Her second, Many Mountains to Climb, Reflections on Competence, Courage, and Commitments, is an exciting anecdotal account of her climbing challenges, practically applied to help you plot your way to more surely to a professional and personal success. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a privilege to present to you Ms. Stacy Allison.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here today. Mount Everest is huge. It's majestic and it's overpowering. It rises over 29,035 feet in elevation. To the Sherpa people who live beneath her shadows, she's known as Sagamartha, Mother Goddess of the World. And for climbers, this mountain has come to represent one of the grandest prizes in mountaineering. But you have to understand that you have only 25% chance of reaching the top and an even greater chance of getting slammed in the process. When the stakes are this high, every decision matters. How we choose to participate as team members and leaders makes a difference, not only in our survival, but our success. And the same is really true with you. If you think about it, you're involved in a situation that is dynamic, demanding, and sophisticated. Your academic work, your training, your leadership training regimen, it all requires you to make decisions that matter. It requires you to choose how you're going to participate as a team member and a leader along the way for your success and your very survival. So let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to start above 25,000 feet on the side of Mount Everest. Scott Fisher, Hugh Belk, Wes Krause, and I were climbing towards the top. It was our summit bid. The day was absolutely perfectly clear. There wasn't a cloud in the sky. I can remember counting my steps, 1, 2, 49, 50. I would pause and I would look out at the horizon, some of the world's highest peaks far below me. And then I would look up at the peak of Everest, glistening in the sunlight, and I would remind myself why I was there. And then back to counting my steps, all along thinking that nothing can stop us. This is our summit bid. Almost 2 days we would be climbing towards the top. At one point I paused and I looked around, and what I saw was a bank of ominous black clouds gathering below us. Well, this is the one thing that could stop us. It's also the one thing we had absolutely no control over. We had a decision to make. Do we continue climbing regardless of the consequences, or do we play it safe and turn around and go back down? Well, what if the storm turned out to be nothing? So we made the decision to push on. We pushed higher on the mountain. The winds picked up, the clouds moved closer, but still we pushed further up the mountain. It wasn't until the wind gusted so hard that it would knock us off balance that we knew we had been wearing blinders. We saw and wanted to see our reality the way we wanted, not how it actually was. There's so much pressure to succeed, and you all know what I'm talking about. Pressure to get it right the first time, pressure from ourselves, and pressure from those who have invested in us. I personally had been dreaming about climbing Everest for 6 years, 2.5 years preparing for the climb, 45 days on the mountain. I couldn't fathom giving all that up. We had a lot invested in time and energy and resources. Our reputations were on the line. It's black and white. You either make it to the top or you come home ready to explain what went wrong. And sometimes when there's so much pressure, we push harder and harder. And sometimes the harder we push, the more resistance we encounter. Effective decision-making requires that we take off the blinders. It requires that we observe and work with our given set of constraints and our given environment. We don't conquer mountains, we work with them. And our blinders, be they pride, ego, fear, old habits, or personal investment, they've got to come off in order to make the effective decision. And what happens if we don't take off the blinders and that given environment changes? It leaves us, or rather forces us, into a reactive mode. It leaves us more vulnerable, and it significantly narrows our options. Our options were narrowed on this climb. We knew we could not sit out a major storm above 26,000 feet at our next highest camp. We also knew that at this point, we couldn't go all the way back down to base camp. So we had only one option left, and that was to go back down to our next lowest camp. 20 minutes after we made that decision, one of the worst storms in 40 years slammed into the side of Everest. And it was all we could do to get back down to our camp alive. Have any of you ever spent time in a snow cave? Well, we don't have time for that story, but suffice it to say that we spent 5 days in this snow cave. The weather was blowing, the wind was blowing over 100 miles an hour. We spent 5 days here. We climbed up higher on the mountain, spent another 3 days above 26,000 feet, and we knew we would not make it to the top. We turned around. We failed. And I want to just touch briefly on failure, because people fail all the time. It's part of the process towards success. Failure is only temporary. It allows us to learn from our mistakes so that we can take that learning and turn it into knowledge and get back on the mountain and try again. It's when we give up, that's what makes failure permanent, because when we give up, we don't learn and we never go back. And the other thing I want to mention here is it takes strength and courage to climb a mountain. It takes strength, courage, and wisdom to turn around. And what that means is the strength to constantly look up, assess, and reassess every step of the way. Take those blinders off. The courage to change when something is no longer serving our purpose. And wisdom is simply learnings from the successes and our failures, and turning those learnings into knowledge that we can use to get back on track. I was very fortunate because the following year I did go back to Everest again. The first expedition was from the north side in Tibet. The second time I would be climbing from Nepal. Now you think your challenges start as soon as you get to the mountain, but that's not true. Our challenges began when we arrived in Kathmandu after 17 hours of sitting on an airplane. It was like letting lions out of a cage. The first thing we had to do was get our 460 boxes of food and equipment out of customs. So what did we do? We ran into the airport, and instead of knocking politely on the door of the customs agent's office, we burst through that door. And we said, we would like to get our gear. And he said, oh, namaste. And we bowed and said namaste, which is the typical greeting. And he said, sit. And we looked at him and we said, sit. We've just been sitting for 17 hours. No, thank you. And he looked at his watch and he said, your paperwork is not ready. You must come back this afternoon at 2:30. So out we went. In we came at 2:30. This time we were polite. We knocked on the door. Namaste, namaste. And he said, sit. And this time we sat. And then he ordered tea. And we said, no, thank you. We don't have time for tea. And he said, oh, your paperwork is still not ready. So out we went, in we came, out we went, in we came. But it seemed like the harder we pushed, the more resistance we encountered, because the calmer our customs agent became. How many of you get so caught up in your busyness of business that you forget to sit down and drink tea with people? How many of you know the golden rule? Okay, well, hopefully, what is it? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you, which is self-focused. A better rule is the platinum rule. Do unto others as they would have you do unto them. We live in a global environment. We all have different goals, values, beliefs, needs. We all have different solutions. And the only way we understand people is to sit down, listen to them, and actually hear them. It took us a long time because we were very slow learners. It took us 11 days and a $2,000 gift. But our customs agent taught us a very important lesson. And if you think you don't have time on the front end to sit down and drink tea with people, it's going to cost you on the back end. We finally got our 460 boxes and we hiked 125 miles to the base of Mount Everest. The base of the mountain would be like your headquarters, if you will. If a storm moves in on the mountain, you can always come back to the safety of base camp. Now, the first 2,000 feet of climbing on the south side of the mountain is the Khumbu Ice Fall. It's referred to climbers as the mouth of death. For 10 people who go into the ice fall, 1 person will not return. So obviously we had a strategy. We had worked out in advance. However, it's not until you get into the ice fall that you can figure how to get around the myriad of ice towers and crevasses. And if you can see those dots, those are people, to give you some perspective on how big some of these ice towers can be. We brought 2 miles of safety line with us that we would anchor into the snow and ice, clip ourselves onto that rope in case we should slip and fall, that's going to catch us. We also brought along 8-foot long aluminum ladders. We would link those ladder sections together, hoist them over the crevasses so that we could then walk across them. And by the way, these are OSHA approved. So I'm going to digress and have you follow me across this particular ladder section. And by the way, anytime we encounter challenges, it causes us to ante up. You know, do we want to continue? Is our goal worth it? Do we see ourselves reaching the top of Everest? Otherwise, if you don't see yourself achieving your goal or reaching the top of the mountain, you're not going to take the risk of crossing these ladders. So here I am. I'm pretty small, and so being small, I get to go first on a lot of things. So I'm the first crossing this ladder section. I'm looking up at my right-hand side. There was a 10-ton ice block perched, ready to fall on me at any moment. So I'm focused on that. Now I'm starting to walk across the ladder, and I'm a little off balance and thinking to myself, you can do this, you can do this. And then I get a little further out, and my eyes were drawn to the depths of the crevasse. Oh, my heart started pounding, and I kept thinking, don't look down, don't look down. And I'm working my way across the ladder span. I get out into the middle of that ladder span, and it starts to go up and down like this. And the first thing I thought of was, I don't have to do this. I don't have to do this. I'm going to turn around. So I turned around, and there were my teammates waiting very patiently for me. And I turned back around, and one thing was very clear to me, that I couldn't turn around because they couldn't do their job until I had done mine. I don't know how I made it to the end of that ladder span, but I did. And once you do it over and over again, it's pretty easy. The big picture, the ice towers, the crevasses, reaching the top of Everest is overwhelming. Execution doesn't happen in the big picture. Execution happens when we narrow down and focus one step at a time. You have to know how you fit into that big picture, but understand that things happen when you focus down. And I put this in here because I think it's important, again, going back to the concept of doing your job so others can do theirs. When someone sets up the ropes and ladders, we don't inspect it every time we use those ropes and ladders. We have to trust that our teammates are doing what they're supposed to do and that everything is anchored properly so that we can safely get up and back down the mountain. And I want to just touch on communication. Obviously, it is of the utmost importance. And also respect. You know, when you work with more than one or two people, you're not going to respect everybody. That's just how it is. But you have to treat everybody with respect. And that's how you build a team, and that's how you communicate and learn from one another. What do you think this guy's chances are of making it to the top? Pretty slim, right? We don't need to carry all the weight of the world on our shoulders. We need to learn to ask for help. Now, you know, there are a variety of reasons why people don't ask for help, but the fact of the matter is, when you ask somebody for their assistance, you have the courage and the strength to understand that you can't do it all by yourself. And that is a power source. Ask for help. You don't need to carry the weight of the world by yourself. After 21 days of climbing on the mountain, we were ready to go for the summit. Now, 21 days is a long time. So up above the ice fall, we set up our first camp, and we didn't immediately arrive at the top of the ice fall and find tents and everything set up for us. We had to go through that ice fall many, many, many times in order to get enough tents, food, fuel, and equipment to actually set up a camp. But then we didn't all just move up to that camp. Only 3 people moved up to that first camp, while the other team members continued carrying loads of food and equipment to that first camp. So on and so forth to 26,000 feet. We set up 4 camps. It's been a team effort so far. Above 26,000 feet, it becomes an individual effort. Each person is dependent upon their own strength, knowledge, and judgment. Because above 26,000 feet, we don't rope up, we don't fix the route. Not all of us would go to the top together. The people who were highest on the mountain would go first. I was one of those who was highest on the mountain. And once again, I found myself counting my steps. 1, 2, 49, 50, pausing, looking out at the horizon, looking up at the peak of Everest, this time glistening in the moonlight. And then I would focus down and continue counting my steps, thinking nothing could stop us. Not this time. It's absolutely perfectly clear. The weather is perfect. And then I paused and I looked down and I noticed that 2 of our Sherpas were far below us. They had turned around. With them, they took 2 extra bottles of oxygen that we would all need in order to reach the top. But we didn't talk about it. Well, actually, we said a few 4-letter words, but we continued climbing up the mountain like we had no care in the world. We got up to 28,000 feet, 1,000 feet shy of the summit, and we realized we had a problem. We had 1 extra oxygen bottle and we had 4 climbers. Who would get that bottle? Jim Frush, who was the expedition leader, said, let's go down to high camp. We'll try again tomorrow. And Jim and Steve and I looked at one another and we said, no way. We've got 1 bottle. Someone has to try to make it to the top. And Jim looked directly at me and my heart started pounding away. And all I could think to say was, let's draw straws. So we had the world's highest lottery at 28,000 feet. Now, some of you might be thinking, what is that all about? You have a strategy on how you're going to climb the mountain and you didn't take this into consideration? Well, the fact of the matter is that any of us could have made it to the top equally. And I knew that I did not want to be chosen because I was a woman. I wanted to earn my spot on top of Everest. So all I could think to say was, well, let's draw straws. So Pasang, our one remaining Sherpa, held the determining number. Steve chose 8, I chose 4, and Jim chose 6. The winning number was 3, and I got that oxygen bottle. I remember looking up at the peak of Everest and then turning around and looking at my teammates. They had a decision to make, all 3 of them. They could risk running out of oxygen and climb to the top, or they could play it safe and turn around. Steve and Jim were not willing to take that risk. Pasang, however, was. And I have come to believe that no matter what our goals are in this life, it boils down to what we're willing to risk. And I'm not talking about physical risk. I'm talking about risk in time and energy and resources. I'm talking about risking your reputation for what you believe, emotional risk. And I also have come to believe that sometimes you have to walk away from everything that has meant security to you in order to reach those goals and those dreams. The 4 of us said our goodbyes. Pasang and I headed up the mountain. Steve and Jim turned around. The closer we got, the more the wind started to blow. As a matter of fact, at this point here, it blew my hat off my head. It hovered in space for about 10 seconds, and then it dropped 8,000 feet. I did not go after it, but I hesitated. If the wind's blowing this hard down here, what will it do to me on the summit? But it was like a magnet at that point. I could see the top, and it was pulling me towards it. And all of a sudden, I found myself on the point where I could go no further. I knew I was on top. I felt this incredible swell of emotion rise inside me. I turned around. I wanted to hug someone. I wanted to see our success, my success, reflected in someone else's eyes. But when I turned around, there was no one there. And sometimes, in our greatest moments of glory, we're going to find ourselves by ourselves. We can't depend on external accolades to validate us. We have to depend deep down inside for our own validation, on our own achievements. 15 minutes later, Pasang joined me on the top. It was also his first time on the top of Mount Everest, and his joy was a joy for me to watch. Now you think, whew, you made it to the top, you can just kick back and relax. Well, we had 35 corporate banners, and we had to photograph those banners. But you never can kick back and relax once you achieve a goal, right? The top is the most vulnerable place to be. You can't survive on top. You can't rest on your laurels. You always have to come back down and set new goals for yourself. What the top is good for is it's good for looking out at new opportunities for growth and development. And then you have to learn, again, from your failures on the climb, your successes on the climb, reflect, and turn those learnings into knowledge. And in closing, the world is not changed by people standing on mountaintops. The world is changed by you, the cadets of our Air Force Academy. You have an incredible opportunity attending the Academy, which also brings an incredible responsibility to give back to your communities, to the United States, to the world. I want to wish each and every one of you the very best as you move forward in your life. Thank you so much. Namaste.